Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. So on this video we're going to be focusing on something called onion architecture. The terms might be pretty confusing. What exactly is onion architecture? So I've thought to simplify this thing, we're going to first divide this thing into two parts, on which the first will be the architecture and then the second will be onion. I want to put it in that way. So architecture. What exactly is architecture? Architecture, in simple words, is basically a design technique that is being used to create something. In this case, it's a technique for designing an application that we're going to be building. And then the onion part, if you really pay attention to onion has got some layers on which, if you focus on the diagram, you can see this thing is basically has layers, on which there's 3 layers in this case. So now we're going to move to the diagram itself. We're going to be explaining what is actually happening within this thing. We're going to focus on the infrastructure and the view at first. As you can see, these are on the same layer, outer layer. Now, what is infrastructure layer? What is view or UI layer? I mean view or UI. What is infrastructure and what is view within this layer? So UI is basically what the user sees every time when they use the application. It's the user interface, it's the interface that the user gets to see. And then we go to the infrastructure, on which infrastructure is where we host or we put our third-party services that our application uses. Then we move to the application, on which application layer contains business logic. It contains some interfaces on which they'll be implemented within the business logic, and some will be implemented within infrastructure layer. Then we have final decor, on which it will contain things like some entities and then some constants. Otherwise, let's move to the next part, on which is to explain what those arrows really mean. So we all understand that, or we can all see that these arrows are pointing to the deep, to inside this whole diagram. They are pointing inside. This simply means dependency within this whole things is going on this direction to the core, meaning infrastructure is dependent on application, and application can be dependent on the core, right? But doesn't go either way, meaning a core can never depend on application. Same applies to application, can never depend on infrastructure. So now I hope we fully understand what is happening within this diagram. So now we're going to be moving to the next part, on which this part is basically about understanding the things that are to be put within a specific layer and or a specific part of the application. Okay, so now we have basically 4 layers. Okay, so let's focus on the UI. So UI, you can see that UI does contain things like controllers, views, view models, middlewares, filters or attributes. All right, and then we move to the infrastructure layer, on which it contains data context, repositories, data city, on which is used when you want to provide, when you run your application, you just want to provide some data on the DB, the image you run your application. We also have some data migrations. Then we move to the application layer, the business layer, on which it contains abstract classes, interfaces, on which I've said they will be implemented within the application service, on which I've said here, or within the repositories here. So we move to the commands, the queries, exception, model, data transfer objects, entities, enums, and constants within the core layer. So we simply understand what is happening here. I'll leave a link of the document in which I've got most of the things from. Now, since we understand this whole diagram that is happening here, we understand the arrows, we understand the importance of having an architectural principles being applied when we build something. So let's do a quick recap. So what we said was that it's important to have a principle of building something. Reason being is that we make sure that it's easy to maintain our application. It's easy to go back and improvise our application. It's easy for anyone who's new to the system to fully understand and be able to carry on and make progress within the application. That's why we have separation of concerns on this thing. Okay, now I'm gonna be moving to the next part, on which is to build an application. And then I'll be building application, not necessarily implementing the business logic or like creating actual classes, but I'm just showing you like how this thing can be done in terms of the layers, how to create those layers and all that thing. By the way, I prefer using Visual Studio Code. On most of the videos I'll be using Visual Studio Code, I prefer, and then I'll be probably using some terminal to create most of the things. So if you're not comfortable with the terminal, you'll probably catch up pretty soon. So now we're gonna be moving to a folder. I have an old folder open here on which it is called Onion Architecture. So this is an empty folder. So on this folder we're gonna be creating our project. So we're gonna open our terminal here, and then I'm gonna bring it over to this side. So as you can see, we are on this directory, right? So from this directory, this is where we're gonna be creating our application. So as I've said, I'll be demonstrating this thing using my terminal or PowerShell, and you can follow along. And then for those who are capable of doing this thing on Visual Studio, feel free to do so. So the first thing I'm going to be doing, I'm going to create a solution file. So a solution file is where it will contain all the projects that I'm going to be used in this thing. Remember something, those layers are specifically different projects being created within the same folder, and then these different projects are going to be put in a single solution file, on which is what we're going to be creating here. So we're going to be doing something called, those who are not familiar with how to create .NET applications with PowerShell or anything, please consider it to be more of like a tutorial here. So now we're going to be creating this solution file. So we're going to say .NET new SLN, on which is for solution. And then if you want to name your solution file, you can specify the name here, but I'm just going to keep it this way. Okay, let me specify the name actually. Let me just call it Onion. So as you can see, we have up here, we have a solution file, SLN file, which the name is Onion. And then we're going to go back to the terminal. Now we're going to be creating our project. So remember something, let's go back to the diagram. So within the diagram we have what? We have the view. Let's focus first on the view. So a view is our web application. In this case, I'm going to be creating a web application. So let me show you the types of projects that I can create with .NET. Let me clear this thing. So to view all the list of projects that you can build within this thing, you can say .NET new and then list. So okay, let me clear this thing and next just do a full screen so that you see this thing pretty well. So that's the one was .NET new list. So here you can view all the list of applications that you can build with .NET. And then what we are interested on is this one, the web application, on which you're gonna be not this one. Oh wait. Yeah, this one, the web application. So we're gonna be building, we're gonna insert the web application as the UI within this solution project, and then we're gonna put it in the solution file, so that when we compile it, we compile together as one project. Now let's clean the screen. So we're gonna say .NET new web app. We're gonna specify the name. If you don't specify the name, it's gonna create let me show you. If you don't specify the name, okay, let me go to the folder, go back to the terminal. Okay, if you don't specify the name here, it will create everything inside of this folder, and which is not what we want. It will insert all the pages, views, and the models, everything within this thing, on which is not what we want. We want to insert the project in its own folder. So we're going to do that by specifying the name, and then from there we're just going to call it onion dot, you can just call it view or UI, whatever you want. I'll just call it view, and then we'll create a project inside a folder called onion.view. So the project is done. The next step is to take that project, that CS project, and insert it within the SLN so that when we compile it, compiles as a one project. So we're gonna say .NET SLN, and then we're gonna add what? We're gonna add onion, not this one. We're gonna add, okay, we're gonna say onion dot view dot what is it? Onion. We need CS project. We need this one. So yeah, and then we're gonna click enter. So as you can see, our project onion onion.view.cs project added to the solution, right? Then we're gonna continue with the next layer, on which is what? Infrastructure. So now I won't do much of explanation, I'll be just creating. So the next thing we're going to be creating, infrastructure, we're going to be creating application, we're going to be creating the code. So now let's move on. So let me just expand this thing. So now we're going to be creating, okay, now we're going to be creating what? We're going to be creating infrastructures on which we just create class library. Okay, before I forget something. So when we want to create another layer, so if we want to create other layers, we have to make a use of a class library. So a class library consider it as to be a separate project, like more of like an empty project, on which you can hold, or on which you can just consider as a layer, basically. Let me put it this way. I don't have a really good explanation on this one. Just consider it as to be more of like a layer or a separate project. It's a separate project. Put it like that. So we create a new class library, and then this class library will be called onion.infrastructure. Okay, and then now we're gonna add this layer to the solution file. Infrastructure. Okay, onion.infrastructure and then from there we're gonna say new class library again, on which this time we're gonna name it. We call it application. Okay, it's onion dot application, right? So then we'll add onion. Okay, the last layer, specify the name on which is going to be onion dot, what is it? It's called, right? And we're just going to add it to the solution file. SLN add. We're going to call it onion application call, and we need the CF. Okay, now we are done. So if we go to the file, this is what we were creating. So as you can see, we have the solution file on which it has all the projects being put together inside this thing. And then we also have different layers, on which is 1, 2, 3, 4, as we have shown on the diagram. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Then we move on to the next part, on which is to open the project on Visual Studio Code. We're gonna do that by going back to this terminal, and then you're gonna say we're gonna say code full stop to open the current folder. Okay, so as you can see, the project is here, and then on Visual Studio Code we do have some assets that have been required in order to be able to build and debug or run this project. So I have a C# extension installed, on which, as you can see, I have this message required. Let me try to move myself a bit. Yeah, as you can see, I have this thing. Let me try to zoom a bit. So I have required assets to build and debug are missing from Onion architecture, on which is the name of the project that we have. Would you like to add? I would say yes. And then as you can see, this is the extension that creates this thing. So let me show you this file structure. As you can see on this file structure, I don't have .vs code file on which that file will be created the minute I click yes, on which this file, it will contain all the assets that are required for me to be able to run and debug the code or build actually. So I'm going to click yes. As you can see, .vs code folder has been created there, on which it contains the assets that have been required. So, but that's not the main purpose of the video. So now we're going to be moving on to the things that have to be implemented within each layer. So now I won't be creating all of the things. I'll be simply demonstrating some of the things that we've talked about. So now let's go back to the UR. So UR can have controllers, views, view model, middlewares, and all that thing. But in this video, I'm just going to be focusing on views and view model. Let's go back to the. So this is our view, on which, as you can see, we do have what we have pages, on which these are like these are, what did we say? These are views basically. Pages are more like views because they contain HTML file, on which HTML is what you see. And then this thing can also contain models, on which you can just provide models. You can create models, on which these models are specifically for pages. Okay, let me, I forgot to take myself down there. Okay, this is I feel like, okay. Now we're gonna move on to the next layer, on which is infrastructure, on which infrastructure contains folders of data settings, repositories, data context. So what you're gonna do is same thing as we've created. We're just gonna create those folders, or which you can call them repositories. And then let's delete this. And then you can also create a folder for serial. What did I? It's called what? Data serial. New folder. Data serial. Yep. And then so forth. So this is basically what you have to go through in order to completely build an onion architecture application. So I feel like that's it. So basically now what we can do, we can come here, open our terminal, build this application. Let's see if we're ever going to be able to build the application. So you can see all projects are up to date to the full store. Okay. Oh, by the way, we are using .NET 7. I have it on my machine. If however, like when you build this thing, if you don't specify the framework that you want to use, it will always take the biggest framework that you have, the latest framework you have on your machine. On this case, I have .NET 5, .NET 7 I meant to say. So you can also view like a list of SDKs or .NET frameworks that you have. Let me show you. So you can basically say .NET I don't know, is it list SDKs? Okay, let me see something specific. Should be able to see. Okay, yeah. So basically, so I was supposed to say it. So yeah. So as you can see, I have 7.0 as my latest. That's why my project is being built using 7.0 here. And then as you can see, the project has managed to build. And then let's look at the solution file. The solution file is quite interesting because it contains all the things that we were adding, all the projects, all the 4 projects that we have created. So as you can see, we have what? We have the core, we have the application, we have infrastructure, and then we have the view. These are all the projects that have been contained within the solution file. And then when we build this thing, they are being compiled as one project, and which is pretty fascinating about this thing. So now we can run this application. Let's just debug this thing, run it, and see what's happening. It'll just be a normal default application, as you can see, is building actually. And then now we have welcome. So that's what it basically takes to build an onion architectural application. So thank you for watching, guys. See you in the next upcoming videos. Cheers.